It was just a couple of blocks from this very spot. Nearly 30 years ago, as a young district attorney, I walked into the courtroom for the first time and said the 5 words that would guide my life's work. Kamala Harris, for the people. You know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. We are here because the American dream and our American democracy are under attack and on the line like never before. I'm going to tell you what my mother told me. Don't you ever let anyone tell you who you are. You tell them who you are.
Kamala Harris has had your back, and now we have to have her back.
And years from now, this moment will have passed, and our children and our grandchildren will look in our eyes, and they're going to ask us, where were you when the stakes were so high?
She has spent the best part of 2 decades in public life creating an outstanding work resume. The first Black woman to be elected district attorney in California history. The first woman to be California's Attorney General. The first Indian American senator, and now the first Black woman and first Asian American to be picked as a vice presidential running mate on any major party ticket.
They will ask us, what was it like? And we will tell them. We will tell them not just how we felt, we will tell them what we did.
Kamala Harris, born in Oakland, California on October 20th, 1964. Harris is the eldest daughter of 2 immigrant parents. Born to Shaimala Gopalan, a cancer researcher from India, and Donald Harris, an economist from Jamaica. After her parents divorced, Harris was raised primarily by her single mother in Berkeley. While Harris recalls that her parents met during the civil rights movement and would take their young daughters to marches, she learned at a very young age that the country she called home was not always friendly to its citizens of color. In an interview with the Los Angeles Times, Harris remembers visiting her father in Palo Alto and being told by a child in the neighborhood that she was forbidden to play with her and her sister simply because they were Black. When Harris began kindergarten, she was bused as a part of Berkeley's comprehensive desegregation program to Thousand Oaks Elementary School, a public school in a predominantly white neighborhood. Formerly, the student intake had been 95% white, but the desegregation figures meant that 40% of the student body were Black. Harris had expressed that these early experiences in her life made her feel like an outsider and had a profound impact on her life. Learning about fearless leaders such as Constance Baker, Thurgood Marshall, Charles Hamilton Houston, and Constance Baker Motley, Harris began to see the qualities needed in a person to take a stand against injustice and to be powerful in their own right. It was from this early age she resolved to spend her life advocating for those who could not defend themselves. While growing up in Oakland, she was immersed in both Indian and African American culture. Shamala introduced Kamala and her sister Maya to Hinduism, taking them to a Hindu temple as young girls. And she was also heavily influenced by her grandfather, a high-ranking government official who fought for Indian independence, and her grandmother, an activist who traveled the countryside teaching impoverished women about birth control. Harris noted in her autobiography, "My mother understood very well that she was raising 2 Black daughters. She knew that her adopted homeland would see Maya and me as Black girls, and she was determined to make sure we would grow into confident, proud Black women." When she was 12 years old, Kamala and her family moved to Montreal after Shamala had accepted a research and teaching position at McGill University. The sisters attended a French-speaking school, where Kamala would look out for Maya on the schoolyard. Her activism certainly began at a young age, as she and her sister organized a protest to overturn a policy that banned children from playing in the courtyard of their apartment building, which they won. Her high school best friend, Wanda Kagan, had a profound impact on Kamala's life and choice of career in addressing wrongs in society. The teenage Wanda was harboring a dark secret. In September 2020, with Kagan's blessing, Harris shared the heartbreaking story on her social feeds. In the post, Harris revealed, "When I was in high school, I had a best friend who I learned was being molested by her father."
And so I said to her as soon as she told me, "Well, you have to come stay with us." And a big part of the reason I wanted to be a prosecutor was to protect people like her. And in fact, the vast majority of my career as a prosecutor was about protecting women and children, including a significant period of time where I specialized in child sexual assault cases.
After graduating from high school, Harris moved back to the U.S., where she pursued a degree in political science and economics at Howard University, one of the longest-standing historically Black colleges in the country. While at Howard, she interned as a mailroom clerk for California Senator Alan Cranston, chaired the Economic Society, led the debate team, and joined Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Spending 4 years there, Harris described the time as probably the most formative experience of her life. After earning a law degree from the University of California, Hastings, she began her career in the Alameda County District Attorney's Office, focusing on sex crimes. Her family were initially skeptical of her career choice. Harris herself acknowledged that prosecutors have historically gained a bad reputation. Nevertheless, she realized that change had to come from within the system, and she was prepared to tackle this issue. The quest led to her spending 8 years in the DA's office before moving to the San Francisco District Attorney's Office as Assistant District Attorney, where she was promoted to oversee the Career Criminal Unit. A move to San Francisco City Hall Family and Children's Services Division allowed her even more involvement with a subject close to her heart, representing child abuse and neglect cases. It would be during her time in this role and subsequent positions that Harris would prosecute a number of controversial three-strikes cases. The harsh sentencing has been the subject of much public criticism, and while considering a person's criminal past during sentencing is not a new concept, the law established in 1994 enforces mandatory life sentences for repeat offenders. Under California's controversial three-strikes law, any person who has committed 3 felonies, which includes crimes like arson, robbery, drug possession, and firearm violations, can receive a life sentence. This legal ruling has had a catastrophic impact for those who have committed a series of nonviolent crimes, for example, drug possession, which in itself disproportionately affects Black people, with this group making up 43% of the state's prison population. Under the law, someone who committed a 3rd felony could go to prison for 25 years to life, even if the 3rd felony was a nonviolent crime. Harris was instrumental in determining that the San Francisco DA's office only charged for a 3rd strike if the felony was a serious or violent crime. Even though Harris consistently faced criticism for the three-strikes law, she has defended her actions several times.
How do you reconcile your contradictory past with what you claim to support today?
I've been consistent my whole career. My career has been based on an understanding, one, that as a prosecutor, my duty was to seek and make sure that the most vulnerable and voiceless among us are protected. And that is why I have personally prosecuted violent crime that includes rape, child molestation, and homicide. And I have also worked my entire career to reform the criminal justice system, understanding, to your point, that it is deeply flawed and in need of repair.
In 2003, Kamala Harris ran for office to become San Francisco's district attorney, making history as the first person of color ever elected to that position. In the runoff, Harris pledged never to seek the death penalty and to prosecute three-strike offenders only in cases of violent felonies.
It was just a couple of blocks from this very spot, nearly 30 years ago, as a young district attorney, I walked into the courtroom for the first time and said the 5 words, that would guide my life's work. Kamala Harris, for the people.
Subsequently, she launched Back on Track, which allowed first-time drug offenders, including drug dealers, to get a high school diploma and a job instead of incarceration. Adams, Harris's previous spokesperson, noted that the program started in 2005, when most prosecutors were using a tough-on-crime approach. Only a few months into the position as district attorney, Harris came under fire when she found Democrats, as well as people of all political persuasions, united against her. At the time, the story of a murdered California policeman had become national news amid widespread indignation over Harris's role in the case. On the night of April 10, 2004, San Francisco police officer Isaac Espinoza was shot dead in an unprovoked attack by 21-year-old David Hill, a member of the West Mob, a criminal street gang. Espinoza was considered a model cop. At the time, everybody in the community was calling for the death penalty for the suspect, Hill. Harris had made her position on the death penalty clear when she was running for district attorney. She did not believe in it. She came under extreme scrutiny for this decision. Harris was out there on her own, but her conviction never wavered. She took it from all sides on that case, but the strongest example was when she attended the funeral of Isaac Espinoza.
Being at the funeral of Isaac Espinoza, and U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein had been invited to give the eulogy, and she departed from her prepared remarks, and she called out the district attorney, not by name, but making it very clear right in front of Kamala Harris that she felt that this was a case where the death penalty was warranted. And Kamala Harris stood her ground.
The decision Kamala Harris made not to pursue the death penalty for Espinoza would eventually raise its head again in the race for the prestigious and powerful position as California's Attorney General. In the election, she faced Republican Los Angeles County District Attorney Steve Cooley, who led for most of the race with his pro-death penalty stance in stark contrast to his opponent. The race went down to the wire. Initially, some news organizations called the race for Cooley. It took weeks for the final results to be counted. On November 24, 2010, Cooley conceded to Harris, giving the Democrats a sweep of statewide executive offices. On November 30th, Harris declared victory. She was elected as the first African American and first woman to serve as California's Attorney General when her term began in January 2011. In her 2011 inauguration speech, Harris pointed out that in 2010, there were 600,000 truant students in elementary schools alone. In an effort to remedy this, she passed a law making it a criminal misdemeanor for parents to allow their children to miss more than 10% of school days without an excuse. The parents or guardians of truant children could face a $2,000 fine or up to 1 year in jail. "We are putting parents on notice," Harris said at her 2011 inauguration. "If you fail in your responsibility to your kids, we are going to work to make sure you face the full force and consequences of the law." However, this policy ended up generalizing the truancy issue, placing blame on parents with circumstances outside of their control. Harris has since apologized for criminalizing parents in an interview. "This was never the intention," she apologized. "I regret that that has happened, and the thought that anything I did could have led to that." Another controversial issue surrounding Harris's time as the Attorney General was her and her lawyer's stance on prison reform. In 2011, the Supreme Court demanded the state of California reduce its prison population by 33,000 inmates in the next 2 years due to overpopulation resulting in malnourishment and inhumane treatment, according to NPR. In 2014, federal judges ordered that all nonviolent second-strike offenders be eligible for parole after serving half their sentence. At the time, most of those prisoners were working as groundskeepers, janitors, and kitchen staff. Allegedly, Harris's lawyers argued in court that releasing them would drastically reduce their prison labor pool. However, she later stated that she was shocked to hear their defense. Always willing to admit when mistakes have been made, she said, "I was very troubled by what I read. I just need to find out what we did actually say in court. Throughout her time in office, Harris's position on a lot of key issues evolved. One in particular was her stance on marijuana. In 2010, Harris was staunchly opposed to the use of recreational marijuana, believing that drug selling harms communities. In 2015, at the California Democrats' convention, she called for an end to the federal ban on medical marijuana, but withheld the term legislation. It wasn't until 2018, as senator, that she co-signed Senator Cory Booker's Marijuana Justice Act.
Let's get smart. So the fact is that marijuana laws are not applied and enforced in the same way for all people. So for example, African Americans use marijuana at roughly the same rate as whites, but are approximately 4 times more likely to be arrested for possession. That's just not fair. So we need to change the system.
I'm proud to stand with Senator Kamala Harris and others in supporting the Marijuana Justice Act.
One of her signature accomplishments as Attorney General was creating Open Justice, an online platform to make criminal justice data available to the public. This database helped improve police accountability by collecting information on the number of deaths and injuries of those in police custody. One could argue that since her Senate campaign in 2016, Harris has tried to perhaps gloss over parts of her record she has had second thoughts about, and instead emphasize the positive reforms she has supported and implemented over the years. Notwithstanding this, many have commended her in her adoption of sweeping rhetoric about the criminal justice system, which she has passionately argued needs to be systematically changed. In her personal life, she married Doug Emhoff, a corporate lawyer in Los Angeles, at a small and private ceremony officiated by her sister in 2014. Emhoff has 2 children from his previous marriage, and they call Harris Mamala. Running for the first California Senate seat to open in 25 years, Harris won and made history again after becoming only the 2nd Black woman and the first South Asian American ever to do so, defeating fellow Democrat Loretta Sanchez, a moderate congresswoman with 20 years of experience. While in the Senate, Harris served on 2 powerful committees, the Intelligence Committee and the Judiciary Committee. As the committees dealt with important issues, such as the investigation into Russian influence and meddling in the 2016 election and judicial appointments to the Supreme Court, Harris became known as a sharp, aggressive questioner who could unnerve opposing witnesses. Harris wasted no time, initially speaking out in opposition to Trump's cabinet pick of Betsy DeVos for Secretary of Education, concluding that DeVos had not done her homework in preparation for the job.
Maybe one school cuts their after-school program, or stops teaching the arts, or doesn't have a guidance counselor, or decides that they'll just let class size balloon because they don't have enough teachers. And DeVos's agenda means fewer teachers and resources, and worse schools. Fundamentally, her lack of understanding of the rights that teachers have today, the rights that parents have today, and the rights students have today mean one thing. She cannot and will not uphold the law if she does not understand the law. And I say that right now, the Senate must do our job, we must do our homework, and we must refuse to confirm her as the next Secretary of Education.
She went viral in 2017 for her sharp questioning of then Attorney General Jeff Sessions on the Russia investigation. After 3.5 minutes of persistent questioning,
did you have any communication with any Russian businessmen or any Russian nationals?
I don't believe I had any conversation with Russian businessmen or Russian nationals.
Are you aware of
Although
any communications?
A lot of people were at the convention. It's conceivable that somebody
Sir,
came
I
up to me.
have just a few.
Will you let me qualify it? If I don't qualify it, you'll accuse me of lying. So I need to be correct as best I can.
I do want you to be honest.
I'm not able to be rushed this fast. It makes me nervous.
The following year, Harris was involved in the high-profile Facebook Cambridge Analytica data scandal, questioning Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg and whistleblower Christopher Wiley on reports that Cambridge Analytica misappropriated the data from 87 million Facebook users to suppress the votes of African Americans and the extent to which Facebook violated the privacy of its users.
In 2015, when we heard about this, we banned the developer and we demanded that they delete all the data and stop using it, and same with Cambridge Analytica. They told us they had.
Testimony in that regard, but I'm talking about notification of the users. And I'm also concerned that when you personally became aware of this, did you or senior leadership do an inquiry to find out who at Facebook had this information, and did they not have a discussion about whether or not the users should be informed back in December of 2015?
It was clear when clips of her persistent and unwavering questioning went viral that Harris's impact on the world had only just begun. On January 21st, 2019, Martin Luther King Jr. Day no less, Harris announced that she would be running for president in the 2020 election. Within 24 hours of the announcement, Harris's campaign received over $1.5 million in donations from about 38,000 individuals across all 50 states, with the average donation being $37. At the time, this record amount of funding tied with the one set by U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders during the 2016 election.
My mother used to say, "Don't sit around and complain about things, do something." And basically, I think she was basically saying, you've got to get up and stand up and don't give up the fight.
She was born in Oakland, raised in Berkeley. Women of color, especially African American women, have been the backbone of the Democratic Party. And we deserve a seat at the table. So it's an exciting time. There are many progressive candidates who are running. So I think it's going to be an exciting campaign.
That I'm going to work hard for her. I'm going to campaign for her.
And she comes well prepared for the task ahead.
Kamala Harris running for president is a great example to all of our community here in Oakland and our young people especially that we can take action.
She started very strongly in her bid to become the Democratic presidential nominee, giving an especially promising showing at the Democratic primary debate in June 2019, when she confronted none other than Joe Biden on his history of opposing the federal busing program.
It's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. Do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No.
Do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
We have to be honest about what happened. I mean, we really have to be honest. And I said what I meant. It was hurtful. I have a great deal of respect for Joe Biden. And I think it's really important for us to remember our nation's history on these issues. And that it's not history from a really long time ago. Like, it directly impacted me.
Kamala also spoke about her disdain for Donald Trump, and in particular, the incident of June 2019, when although he didn't mention them by name in his series of tweets, Trump was obviously targeting some of the caucus's best-known freshman women of color, Representatives Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Ayanna Pressley.
I've personally been told that. Go back to where you came from. And so my message right now, because first of all, I intend to win this election. I intend to win this election. But my message today to everyone who has ever heard that, or looks like anyone who has ever heard that, or has a story like anyone who has ever heard that, or a family member who has ever heard that, you belong. You belong, and we are all in this together.
Kamala Harris was accused of having an inconsistent stance on healthcare, which made voters skeptical. Although she said she supported the abolition of private healthcare, she later denied her statement and said she had misheard the question. She eventually released a healthcare plan that still included private health insurance. In the second Democratic debate in August, Harris was confronted by Biden and Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard over her record as Attorney General.
There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
After taking a hard look at her campaign's financial future and low poll numbers, in December 2019, Harris withdrew from the presidential race. A common criticism of Harris's campaign was that she tried to walk a line between the moderate and the progressive wings of her party, and eventually ended up appealing to neither. Harris did not give up her fight for those communities that faced injustice after her presidential bid ended, and she continued to work for the American people. Before the opening of the impeachment trial of Donald Trump on January 16, 2020, Harris delivered remarks on the floor of the Senate, stating her views on the integrity of the American justice system and the principle that nobody, including an incumbent president, is above the law.
There have been 3 impeachments of a president of the United States in the over 2 centuries of our history. This is the most serious in terms of the charges.
March 8, 2020. 6 days after the California primary, she threw her support behind Biden and said he was a leader who could unify the people. In March, Biden committed to choosing a woman for his running mate. Harris responded to media speculation and said she would be honored to be Biden's running mate. In the wake of the death of George Floyd and ensuing protests and demonstrations, Harris showed support to the community, crediting the civil rights marchers to her path to the Senate. On August 11, 2020, Biden announced that he had chosen Harris. She is the first African American, the first Indian American, and the 3rd woman after Geraldine Ferraro and Sarah Palin to be picked as the vice presidential nominee for a major party ticket.
And when you put the kind of fight and work that you have always put into investing in the future of America, we will elect Joe Biden as the next president of the United States.
The two had made amends after the dispute with the debates about busing, with Harris understanding Biden's take on the issue and realizing that this was decades ago when the political climate was very different.
First of all, is the answer yes?
The answer is absolutely yes, Joe, and I am ready to work. I am ready to do this with you, for you. I'm just deeply honored, and I'm very excited.
Biden appealed to the U.S. voters as he already had a great deal of experience in the White House. At the time of the 2020 elections, many Americans were nostalgic for the previous Obama administration. Biden, as vice president through these years, seemingly offered comfort to many of the voters. His wife, Jill Biden, to whom he had been married since 1977, taught English and reading in high schools for 13 years, and also taught adolescents with emotional disabilities at a psychiatric hospital, and was thought to be the first second lady to hold down a regular job while her husband was vice president. Choosing Harris as his running mate mirrored Obama's decision to pick Biden in 2008. She balanced out Biden's views and was able to represent a younger and more liberal side to the party. Biden and Harris's speeches as the 2020 Democratic presidential nominees won praise from both the left and the right. They were ready to take on Trump.
I accept this nomination for President of the United States of America. But while I'll be a Democratic candidate, I will be an American president.
In this election, we have a chance to change the course of history.
Here and now, I give you my word. If you entrust me with the presidency, I will draw on the best of us, not the worst.
So let's fight with conviction. Let's fight with hope. Let's fight with confidence in ourselves and a commitment to each other.
And now history has delivered us to one of the most difficult moments America's ever faced. Four historic crises, all at the same time.
We will tell them what we did.
And this is a battle we will win, and we'll do it together. I promise you.
From the moment Biden was selected as the Democratic presidential nominee, Trump attempted to cast doubt over Biden's abilities, claiming that he was suffering from dementia and that he was taking performance-enhancing drugs in the primaries. The first debate took place at Cleveland Clinic on September 29th. The 90-minute showdown was reported by the media as a dumpster fire, a train wreck, and was widely criticized as being a low point in U.S. presidential politics. Amid the acrimonious exchanges, Trump repeatedly interrupted Biden and moderator Chris Wallace of Fox News.
I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
But you
I just
agree.
want to
Hey,
make sure.
Joe, you're the liar.
I want to make sure.
Graduated last in your class, not first in your class.
I want to make
Mr.
sure.
President, can you let him finish, sir?
No, he doesn't know how to do that. I'm not going to answer the question
Why
because
would you answer that
because
question?
the question is the question
Supreme Court
is
Justice,
the
radical
question.
left.
Will you
Who
shut
is
up,
on,
man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
This
Who's
is
on your
so
list?
Right, gentlemen, I think
This
we've
is
ended
so
this.
unprecedented.
He's going to pack the court.
We have
I'm not going to give a list.
We have ended this segment. We're going to move on.
The vice presidential debate took place on October 8th. At this point in the race, Biden was leading in the polls, so the pressure was particularly on for Pence to defend the administration's record, just days after the president tested positive for COVID-19. Donald Trump interrupted Joe Biden 71 times during the first presidential debate. Pence cut in on Harris a lot less, perhaps because one of his early attempts was witheringly cut down by Harris.
Well, I mean, I thought we saw enough of it in last week's debate, but I think this is supposed to be a debate based on fact and truth. And the truth and the fact is, Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000 a year.
He said he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well, wait.
I'm speaking.
In the final presidential debate, Biden came out swinging, making a case that over 222,000 Americans had died from coronavirus, in large part because of the Trump administration's response to the deadly disease. In contrast to the first debate, the microphones of both candidates were muted at select times.
I have released all of my tax returns, 22 years. Go look at them. 22 years of my tax return. You have not released a single solitary year of your tax return. What are you hiding? Why are you unwilling?
President Trump, your response.
First of all, I called my accountants under audit. I'm going to release them as soon as we can. I want to do it, and it'll show how successful, how great this company is.
Election night, November 3rd. The night ended without a clear winner, as many state results were too close to call and millions of votes remained uncounted, including in the battleground states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Results were delayed in these states due to local rules on counting mail-in ballots. Trump made a speech to a room full of supporters, falsely asserting that he had won the election and calling for a stop to all vote counting, saying that continued counting was a fraud on the American people and that we will be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Biden campaign denounced these attempts.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. So our goal now is to ensure the integrity for the good of this nation. This is a very big moment. This is a major fraud in our nation.
In Pennsylvania, where the counting of mail-in ballots began on election night, Trump declared victory on November 4th with a lead of 675,000 votes, despite more than 1 million ballots remaining uncounted. Trump also declared victory in North Carolina and Georgia. Some Trump supporters expressed concerns of possible fraud after seeing the president leading in some states on election night, only to see Biden take the lead in subsequent days. On November 5th, a federal judge dismissed a lawsuit by the Trump campaign to stop vote counting in Pennsylvania. The Trump campaign had alleged that its observers were not given access to observe the vote, but its lawyers admitted during the hearing that its observers were already present in the vote counting room. Also that day, a state judge dismissed another lawsuit by the Trump campaign that alleged that in Georgia, late arriving ballots were counted. The judge ruled no evidence had been produced that the ballots were late. By November 7th, several prominent Republicans had publicly denounced Trump's claims of electoral fraud, saying they were unsubstantiated, baseless, or without evidence, damaging to the election process, undermining democracy, and dangerous to political stability, while others supported his demand of transparency. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. was elected the 46th President of the United States on November 7th, and Kamala Harris as the vice, promising to restore political normalcy and a spirit of national unity to confront raging health and economic crises, and making Donald J. Trump a one-term president after 4 years of tumult in the White House. Mr. Trump is only the third elected president since World War II to lose re-election, and the first in more than a quarter century. She will be the first female vice president, as well as the first person of color to hold the post since Charles Curtis, a Native American who served under Herbert Hoover from 1929 to 1933.
We did it, Joe. You're gonna be the next president of the United States.
The Biden-Harris ticket received the most votes for any presidential candidate ever. They promised to reverse some of Trump's more controversial policies, including that on climate change and to work more closely with American allies. They will focus on ending the pandemic, expanding healthcare, reforming immigration, stronger action on climate change, raising the minimum wage, sorting out college debt, and implementing higher taxes for the rich.
It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, lower the temperature, see each other again, listen to each other again. And to make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as our enemies. They are not our enemies. They are Americans. They are Americans. The Bible tells us, to everything there is a season, a time to build, a time to reap and a time to sow, and a time to heal. This is the time to heal in America.
Biden pressed ahead with forming his government. A number of his choices made history, forming the most diverse economic leadership team America has ever seen. The list brings together people who worked with the Obama administration and some who have relationships with President Biden dating back many years. Biden's picks include the first woman to head up the U.S. Treasury, Janet Yellen, plus the first woman to lead national intelligence, the first Latino immigrant to lead the Department of Homeland Security, the first ever climate change envoy, as well as Pete Buttigieg, the former presidential nomination candidate, and the first openly homosexual individual approved by the Senate to a cabinet position.
Love makes my marriage real, but political courage made it possible, including that of Joe Biden, who stepped out ahead even of this party when he said that marriage equality ought to be the law of the land. There is a long way to go. But if this much can change between 2010 and 2020, imagine what could change between now and 2030.
Despite reservations about Harris's past as a prosecutor, her road to becoming the U.S. Vice President-elect has been historic, and for many, the future is a hopeful one. Harris is the first female, first Black, and first South Asian Vice President-elect, is both an affirmation of her excellence, her skill as a debater against Mike Pence, for instance, and a reflection of the inherent racism and sexism faced by women of color who run for executive office. That framing shines a less flattering light on America. Nevertheless, it hints at possibility, the possibility that Harris opened up the door for women and girls who look like her to follow, to claim power for their own.
Because you see, in our system of justice, we believe that a harm against any one of us is a harm against all of us. I would remind them, you are not invisible. We all stand together. Because that is the power of the people. In my whole life, I've only had one client, the people.
Harris's mother put it best. Kamala, you may be the first to do many things, but make sure you're not the last.
And to the woman most responsible for my presence here today, my mother, Kamala Harris, who is always in our hearts. When she came here from India at the age of 19, she maybe didn't quite imagine this moment, but she believed so deeply in an America where a moment like this is possible. But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last.